welcome to the Smart Tech webinar series, Securing the Season. So this is a continuation of the conversation we've had with a lot of you during Zero Day Con and the various kind of conversations we've continued during the year. What we're looking to do here is we enter into a very, very busy holiday season. We're looking to really equip a lot of our guests with, what's happening in the different sectors that we're working with. So this is the first of 5 Securing the Season webinars. This week we kick off at manufacturing. Next week we're going to do one on technology. So really looking forward to having the conversation with you. So today I'm delighted to be joined by my guest, Edwin Bowers. So Edwin is the manufacturing lead at Smart Tech 247. Edwin, continuously shows fantastic vision and expertise in this area as he works with our customers. So great to have you here today, Edwin. And also thanks a lot to Verizon and Google for providing a lot of the background information for today. So maybe Edwin, I'll just kind of jump right in if that's okay with you, yeah?
Yeah.
So Edwin, like the Verizon, the 2025 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report tells us that the manufacturing industry has experienced a stark rise in the number of breaches in 2025, like up to 1,607, up from 849 last year. So why are manufacturing companies the prime targets for cyber attacks?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, basically, attackers are financially motivated and they're going to target companies where they can get the biggest payout. And these attackers know that manufacturing companies are perfect targets because they have intense uptime pressure and any downtime in operations can really hurt them. So the longer they're offline, it affects revenue and profitability, increases operational cost. You've got production backlog you have to fulfill, and you have unhappy customers getting late deliveries. And you can potentially have safety and compliance risks. So we work a lot with food manufacturing companies, and their primary concern is human safety. So they will have to shut down systems as a precautionary from any cyber attack. Manufacturing companies also have intellectual property that if an attacker gains access can destroy their competitive advantage. And the food companies I mentioned earlier, so they have secret recipes that they need to protect. And a lot of manufacturing companies have IP from product design, prototypes, and formulas. And a story that's always stuck with me when I first got into cybersecurity many years ago was an Australian company called Codan, who were one of the leaders in manufacturing metal detectors for companies and individuals. And one of their senior executives took a business trip to China, and whilst connected to a hotel Wi-Fi, his laptop was silently infected with malware that allowed attackers to upload malicious code and copy sensitive IP from the device. And no one noticed for a while, but within a year, customers started complaining about their products. So Codan started investigating because this is a top-end market leader who had never had any problems before. And customers returned broken units to service centers, and technicians who opened the devices noticed components and circuit layouts that looked suspiciously familiar to their designs. So someone was producing cheap, poorly made, lookalike metal detectors and selling them in their export markets. So Codan hired investigators and found counterfeit detectors traced to factories and warehouses in China. And the impact of this was huge. Codan cut prices to compete with the knockoffs. They lost sales and had margin pressures from counterfeit competitors. They incurred legal and investigation expenses. It diverted management time and it caused reputational damage in markets where customers could no longer be sure they were buying their genuine products. What really stuck with me about this IP theft was you often hear about the big cyber attacks on large companies, but even for a niche hardware product like metal detectors, their products can still be targeted, copied, and monetized overseas. So to answer your question, manufacturing IP is incredibly valuable, combined with pressures to continuously manufacture and an attack surface that's very difficult to secure makes them prime targets. And that's why we're seeing an increased rise in attacks on the manufacturing sector.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's really interesting you say that. I mean, in my experience, when people talk about data theft, right? I mean, two typical data thefts are IP theft, as you're talking about, and the others is personally identifiable information, right? And typically companies find out about data theft for PII because a bank or financial institution or a credit card company is calling them up saying, "Here, guys, we have found credit card information or personally identifiable information belonging to a particular individual, and it's attached to a form that's got your name on it, your brand on it, right?" So normally they find out about it pretty quickly, right? But in the case of IP theft, right, if you don't know the IP is gone, it could be years, 7 years, right? A whole design cycle before you find out that, in the case of Codon, they found out someone has actually stolen their IP, and by then it's just way, way too late. Now, great example. Thank you. So, so Edwin, why do manufacturing companies struggle so much with this? Why do they struggle to secure their environment?
So manufacturing companies are fairly unique in their setup, as they have operational technology or OT environments, which often have basic or no security controls in place and contain lots of legacy systems that are often unsupported. So there are no patches or updates, leaving vulnerabilities ever present in their environment. And this is becoming more of an issue as IT and OT systems are becoming more connected as companies go through digital transformation and undertake business integration and efficiency initiatives. So I've seen quite a few companies recently where the CISO has been told, this is now your risk to manage. And what we also see with our customers is that the staff operating these OT environments are usually production workers or operators with little security knowledge. And they're probably log in, twice a week to check their emails. So we have to put in different security controls and tailor security awareness training specifically for them. And manufacturers also struggle because they have very complex interconnected supply chains. And most of them have hundreds or thousands of suppliers from raw material providers to logistics and transport partners, equipment manufacturers, maintenance vendors, and IT and OT service providers. And most of these suppliers connect digitally through email, shared systems, remote access, APIs, or cloud portals. And their attack surface isn't just their network, it's everyone they're connecting to. And manufacturers rarely have deep visibility in how secure their suppliers are. And it's a very difficult thing to do because their suppliers often do vary in size and maturity from global OEMs to tiny companies, which means that the security levels are widely inconsistent.
No, great point, and I totally agree that as security professionals, as we look at rolling out controls and training and enablement around cybersecurity, we got to be really conscious of meeting the recipients where they are in their role on a production line, in a plant, in environments that are not easy to do these types of things in. And that's critical as we look to manage the cyber risk in the companies that we work with. So Edwin, the recently released Google Cybersecurity Forecast 2026 talks about a forecasted rise in ransomware attacks, particularly ransomware attacks targeting ERP systems, which I thought was quite interesting. Obviously, ERP is critical to deliver, at this time of year, given the season. So why do attacks increase during this holiday period?
Yeah, look, it's a consistent pattern in cyber incident data where attacks spike during the holiday season. It's not simply the Grinch who dislikes Christmas trying to ruin it for everyone else. It's financially motivated, and attackers know that there are often fewer people on duty in IT and security teams over the holiday season. And if you're running an in-house SOC, you'll likely have less people monitoring alerts. And this can delay detection and response, as well as cause escalation paths to be slower. So ransomware can spread longer before containment. We all know in security that the time to respond is absolutely vital when defending threats. And unfortunately, the holiday season increases dwell time for attackers, allowing them to go unnoticed for longer. And it's not just companies that have skeleton staff over Christmas, it's also the third party and supply chain. So we often see an increase in supply chain ransomware during low activity periods. A lot of security teams would probably ask Santa for one thing over Christmas, and that's not to have another attack like the SolarWinds Orion breach that ruined their Christmas in 2020. I spoke to quite a few security professionals around that time, and they said they didn't take a single day off that Christmas. And one CISO described it as the Christmas we'll never get back. And you mentioned ERP, and ERP attack isn't isolated to the holiday season, but it's ERP is often the heart of an organization, and it's really critical for operating. So it integrates finance, procurement, logistics, HR, and production, which means a single compromised attack can affect the entire business, and attackers can encrypt or corrupt data across multiple departments simultaneously. It's a core target to disrupt operations and obtain a higher payout. And at this time of the year, companies really need to remind their employees about these holiday-themed phishing emails we always see cropping up in December, like the Christmas bonus or delivery update email.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very relevant because I mean I know like we all feel it, right? You're coming up to the holiday season. There's going to be time off. There's major deliverables from a business perspective. A lot of companies coming into year end, so everything's much more rushed. Everything's much more pressurized. It's absolutely prime time for social engineering attacks. So, Edwin, the Verizon data breach investigations report tells us that 20% of breaches in the manufacturing sector are motivated by espionage, while 80% have a financial motive. So, who's behind these attacks from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, look, the 80% figure that you mentioned, they're typically organized cybercrime groups. So these are the ransomware gangs who are financially motivated, such as Clock, the notorious Russia-linked gang
Yeah.
who topped the ransomware charts with the highest activity this year. So they were responsible for the infamous Move It and the Fortra Go Anywhere hacks that you've probably heard of. Other groups you might be familiar with Akira, Ransom Hub, and Lockbit. Now, these are sophisticated operators who don't just pick any target, they pick companies where downtime is expensive, anyone with production lines, where supply chains are critical, or companies who have OT or IT environments with weak security controls. The 20% that you mentioned, they're typically your nation state or state-sponsored groups, such as Lazarus Group from North Korea or Sandworm from Russia. These attacks are usually for economic espionage, stealing IP, really strategic disruption, targeting critical supply chains, or for geopolitical leverage. So during COVID, we saw an increase in attacks on pharmaceutical companies trying to steal intellectual property and scientific data around COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. And these weren't just for financial gains, these were nation state actors trying to be the first to produce the vaccine and gain a political advantage. There is actually a third group that we're starting to see a lot more from, and that is actually hacktivists. So these are the ideological motivated attackers such as Killnet or Anonymous Sudan. So they want to disrupt production where they can embarrass a nation or a company. So for example, targeting manufacturers that support a nation state that they might disagree with. They're also attacking for environmental motives, targeting oil, chemical, or energy manufacturers. But really, it's the organized cyber crimes that are the most prevalent and have really increased their ransomware activity in the manufacturing sector.
Yeah, I mean those organized crime groups. I mean that's an interesting area. Like, can you give us any insight into how they're operating, what they're doing there? Any perspectives there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the way they operate is really really interesting because they behave like a business would. It's a streamlined revenue machine that runs really well. So they even have customer support teams to give instructions for paying ransomware, and they give demos to victims on how to decrypt once they've paid. They want to help to reduce friction for victims who do agree to pay to keep their reputation intact and encourage other new victims to pay out. And some of the activities they do are fascinating. So they would really analyze financial reports of victims. They would look at their revenue, profitability, and cash in the bank to work out the exact amount to charge victims, where it's not too hard, not too high where they won't get paid, and it's not too low that they haven't maximized their return. And also, like a business, they have a supply chain. So they provide ransomware as a service where the developers will build malware and an admin affiliate portal. They then lease it to these affiliates and get a cut of the ransom revenue. And the affiliates are the people who actually break in and move laterally, exfiltrate and trigger encryption. You also have initial access brokers who are the specialists who buy or sell footholds in the company, selling compromised VPNs, RDP creds, and cloud accounts. What I think is really interesting with the way they operate is, although we hear about the bigger attacks in the news, what we've noticed is that 92% of victims are actually small companies. And that's often because they don't have the large security budgets and lack foundational security controls in place to defend against these attacks. The attackers, they don't need to spend much time on these type of companies to cause havoc because they can use bots and automate parts of the attack.
Absolutely. And I think that that's so relevant because I mean, how many times have we heard, listen, we're not going to be a target, right? Okay, companies just, believe, they're not high profile enough or they're not big enough or whatever to be a target. But the evidence absolutely tells us that, as a small company, you are absolutely a target for these kind of attacks. And thank you, Edwin. So just talking about the types of attacks, again, the evidence tells us, and we're looking at the Verizon data breach report here, that system intrusion and social engineering and basic web application attacks represent 85% of known breaches in manufacturing. But through the 24 by 7 security operations at SmartTech, what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. We typically what we've experienced is we've noticed a lot of ransomware attempts have increased dramatically, and it is the most prevalent attack we see on manufacturing companies. So a ransomware infection on a production line can halt all output, it can delay shipment, and it can ripple across the supply chain. And the victims are more likely to pay quickly to resume operations. So it's definitely the one that we see attempted the most. Social engineering attacks are also increasing. In particular, phishing remains high. And what our SOC has really noticed is the level of sophistication in these phishing emails have increased dramatically. And that's predominantly thanks to AI. You're not seeing any badly written phishing emails anymore. It's usually, worded very well and looks very legitimate. We're seeing those phishing emails really targeting employees in manufacturing offices and plants. We've definitely noticed an increase in those types of employees being targeted more because if their credentials are compromised, attackers will, want to gain access to where they can cause the most disruption. And what we're also seeing with a lot of our customers is a lot more attacks on their supply chain, which is why the newer legislation like NIS2 focuses on companies really understanding and monitoring their supply chain. Not a smart tech customer, but Toyota Motor Corporation. So they had a recent cyber attack on one of their parts suppliers, which forced them to halt production on 14 domestic plants in Japan. 13,000 vehicles were affected as a result. So, attacking
Wow.
suppliers of big companies who use, security partners like SmartTech is going to be a lot harder than attacking a smaller supplier of these big companies who don't have those security controls in place.
No, absolutely. And then when moving from security controls like the, what types of attacks we're seeing, that we're seeing that, malware in known breaches in manufacturing is up 50% year over year. The presence of malware in those breaches, the use of stolen credentials is, I think we're seeing a real growth there, is now present in over one third of known breaches. What sort of attacks are you seeing? What sort of examples can you give us?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's still relevant today that hackers aren't hacking in, they're logging in. And that's why identity is one of the biggest attack vectors that we're seeing, attack threats that we're seeing at the moment for a lot of companies. It's harvesting those credentials, it's using them on systems, it's looking for them on the dark web as they drop and trying to utilize them in organizations. So identity definitely is the biggest one we're seeing.
Okay, great stuff. I'm so impressed, Edwin. I think we got nearly 16 minutes into this before we mentioned the word AI. But I think as we shift now to look more to the future, I think it's key. It's key for us. That we're seeing everywhere. That adversaries are now fully embracing AI. Obviously, that's one of the risk vectors that we think from our manufacturing client base. But can you talk to me about the risk landscape that you see there, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the manufacturing companies are seeing a huge shift as they go through digital transformation projects and adopt new technology. So technologies like digital twins, industrial IoT, 5G, and as you mentioned, AI, which is integrated into their operations, is going to introduce new security challenges that manufacturers will need to address. As OT environments become more connected with IT to improve efficiency, it means that more security controls have to be put in place. So I think all of as their landscape changes, we're going to see a lot more risks that they face.
Okay, great stuff. And I'm a terrible host. I should have said at the start of this call, please, if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat. So you talked about the risks, really driven by digital transformation, AI, the new things like digital twins, industrial IoT. So what are your top three recommendations for manufacturing companies to address these kind of risks?
Yeah, look, it really depends where they are in their cybersecurity maturity journey. I don't want to give three. I know you want three, but they need to they need to start with the foundations. They need to do the risk assessments. They need to understand the critical assets. Where their crown jewels are, and their entire attack surface.
Yeah.
They need to align with recognized frameworks like ISO 27001. They need to test their business continuity plan and have network segmentation in place. They need to try and patch and update systems, implement identity controls, things like MFA and least privilege. They need to be able to monitor and detect threats, and ensure they have immutable backup in place. And actually test this. I've seen organizations before think that they've had backups in place, but because they've never tested it, they didn't realize it wasn't working. They need to assess their vendors and their supply chain, do security awareness training targeted to production workers, and then actually perform testing that these controls have been implemented correctly. But I know that sounds like a lot, and if you push me for three things, I'd say MFA, very very important. Ensuring that you've got backups, and then segmentation is critical. And then if I can get a fourth in there, I definitely say pen testing to ensure that these controls have been set up correctly. And I think most importantly, utilizing a security partner like SmartTech, who will act as an extension of your team and can really help you with your security maturity and address those risks is critical.
No, thanks, Edwin. And listen, I totally agree, particularly, well, with everything, but particularly that last one. I know talking to Aaron Smith in our information security consulting group there, I was chatting to them about some of the work they're doing with our manufacturing clients, and they were talking about how their business models are changing, right? Where manufacturing companies were typically B2B, now they're more and more B2C. Services and intellectual property software is now a much big part of the value chain that they delivered. So the risks are changing, therefore the controls are changing, and that landscape is something that a partner like SmartTech can really help you manage in terms of maintaining and developing your security maturity. So listen, we've covered a lot here, right? And we're just we're just starting. We're just starting to see the impact of AI in cybersecurity. IT directors, security managers, are really drinking from a fire hose. What would you prioritize for smaller, mid-sized companies who may have a limited budget?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's the similar thing. It's the MFA, it's the backups, it's the segmentation. But it really depends where they are in their security journey, because even some of the smaller companies, they've done a lot of work around the policies and procedures, and they haven't actually tested a lot of their security controls. Whereas some smaller companies have bought every product. They've gone to the cyber supermarket and bought every single product, but then they're lacking in any policies and procedures. So I think that's where a partner like SmartTech coming in, actually talking to customers and where they're at in their journey and building a tailored plan specifically to them is crucial.
Absolutely, yeah, so right. Listen, so Edwin, that's fantastic. Listen, thanks a million for your time today, your insights. I really appreciate it. To our audience, really thank you for joining us, for spending the time with us. Please join us, if relevant for you, next week for our session on technology. And please do visit smarttech247.com. We'd love to see everybody at Zero Day Con next year. We've just announced the dates on that. Really excited. April 29th, Dublin, Ireland, Zero Day Con. Please join us. Thank you very much, Edwin, and thanks everyone.